tree farms, a pine farm and apple orchard, maybe being able to get the public involved in like the Christmas season, maybe like have a wreath gathering, or people can pick their Christmas trees. An apple orchard, people could come and pick apples, some things like that. I also wanted to integrate a farmer's market, which you can see from this plane here and this perspective. Really get sort of a farm-to-table setting, be able to sell some of the products from the farm, maybe some local items, local retailers, maybe little sort of mom and pop shop sort of things. I would be able to go in there and people could come by and just walk through and then walk to the farm, which would be right there. A little bit more of an idea on my project I have, excuse me, over in the top section, co-housing community, where you'd be able to have community gardens, and there's a roof greenhouse, an agricultural center, and revive the commuter rail station. I also wanted the area near the farm to be a pedestrian-only retail district, so you'd get rid of your cars across the street, take this pedestrian bridge, and be able to spend the day shopping, grab a beer, have a coffee with your friends, let your kids play in the park, and really just have it a nice community setting.
Materials?
The materials, I hadn't gotten into it too much, but I had been thinking, again, like everybody else, local materials. I also, I didn't design modern. I wanted to sort of keep to the history of Shelburne and the history of Vermont, maybe get into using some of the Vermont marble or stick to just some concrete and brick designs. I didn't want anything too futuristic, something that would really just integrate and settle right into Shelburne. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The agenda indicates this is a time for general questions and answers, if there are any. We'd also take editorials and rebuttals and principled statements, anything that anybody wants to say about anything that has to do with this. When do we start construction? It is right. Sam?
Does anybody want to comment on, a lot of you have picked a section. A lot of you have picked a section. What happens to the rest of the road? In other words, do you think your section is going to make the rest of the road better? And if so, why? And maybe you can talk about your own project, or just conceptually, how does your section end up making the, remember, I think we told you when you started, we didn't want this just to be a strip, a typical strip. So what is it that your section does to have an impact on the part that you didn't develop? Anybody want to comment on that?
I purposely did design for a special note.
Yeah, you're the only one who didn't. Yeah.
I did make a strip. It was on purpose. I think the true identity of the site is it's a corridor. You go through it, and there's no central point. And I wanted to just kind of create a moment throughout the corridor, but not limit its identity. So that was my take on it.
Anybody else? Well, mine did actually focus on a particular point, but I kind of was, I felt that it was kind of hard to, you know, what's something that I could do that could be done throughout the entire, I thought that, you know, maybe we focus on one area that can help a certain spot out that can maybe spiral off and kind of be integrated further into it. The idea behind this was, you know, to get people to enjoy, you know, make it a point where there is a point on the road that is enjoyable and walkable, even drivable, and you know, get people there. So.
Some of the projects that we looked at were mixed-use, new urbanist projects, and so we looked at sort of the classic seaside development. And what's happened there is you know, that development, I think, was done in the early 80s. We've seen all around that more development of its kind sort of spring off of it. and grow. And while these don't really take sort of a direct new urbanist approach, we did, it seems like a lot of the projects did take an approach that they were planting a seed and sort of letting roots take off from there.
Sort of an excess center of energy that then generates.
Right.
Does anybody want to comment on what their project did to the village? I know you were supposed to be concerned with the village in one sense, but did the project help the village, hurt the village? Help the village, hurt the village?
Got it.
The village in and of itself is its own particular point in Shelburne, and it's known for that. And no one really wants to disturb it. It's something that even in the comprehensive plan, it makes a very clear statement that there is a plan for the village. This is not the village. This is a separate piece that branches off of it, and it needs its own center to be located around. And so it's difficult to decide, you know, how much you want to emphasize this new point and not contradict the village. And so it made our jobs a little difficult. And, you know, someone like Mike Lee, he's very futuristic, and he likes to be that way, and he will not hold back. So to some extent, he's contradicting that, but at the same time, you kind of have to have that idea in order to move forward with something that will work.
Thanks for the name drop. Obviously, you know, we have difference of opinions, and I cherish that with Rob. You know, we push each other. And in my case, I didn't want to make another node, because I feel like if you have a node and another node, then it'll take away and weaken the other one. You don't want to make two weak spaces. You want to make one strong and the other one strong independently. And I think that, personally, I think that another node would just take away from the village itself. And so I didn't want to make a center point. I know a lot of people focus on a center point or a different, you know, radial kind of growth.
I'm very proud to be a Norwich graduate right now. If I was only like a tenth as smart as any one of you, you guys are absolutely amazing people. And what you've done is incredible, and I hope we can take any small part of it. I mean, there's some huge brushstrokes here. There are 3 towers up here, and there's one other gateway tower out in the hallway. And I'd use the word cool, but I'm 46 with gray hair, and I have a daughter in college. If you could talk about towers and graphic, you know, architectural pieces, and, you know, what made you think of that, and how, you know, how important is that to you, and how much passion you have behind that, because they seem cool. So,
I mean, although I did not design a tower myself, if you look at Shelburne in section, you cut right down the entire length of the road, you notice that the buildings themselves, they're very parallel to that contour line, so it's very flat. And so to build up is kind of the natural way to say, you know, there's life in me. And there is life in Shelburne. And so I'm not exactly sure if specifically that's why people did it, but for me, it's a very clear distinction of showing the world that Shelburne is alive. Does anyone else have?
I think, or even, I worked closely with the person who designed the Shelburne Tower, and a lot of the main driving points were not to really celebrate per se the buildings that are in Vermont or per se, but to celebrate the environment, what's around us. It's Vermont. Let's celebrate that instead of, you know, just building a building that's insensitive to that. So if we can celebrate that and look at what's here and showcasing that, I think the towers are what it's getting at.
How do we blend the the historic character of Shelburne, and particularly the village, with the need for growth and where growth takes place, and provide some consistency or some level of image?
Okay, sorry for being selfish, guys. But a lot of the building codes now have a strong emphasis on facade and having a graphic representation of what the site is. But I think we need to look beyond that and start thinking about program and how the modern can programmatically fit into the village atmosphere. And I kind of touched on that, but I'd like to see it more too. I want to investigate how we can programmatically involve those spaces together. I don't think it's just an issue of facade and building codes. I think it's a lot more involved in that, and I don't know the answer, but I'd like to take a step forward into how the spaces go with each other, the programming.
I'd also like to say that a lot of these projects too is community. Most of the spaces here, or all of them actually, walkability, a city center, those are the places where your historical value comes into one place. All these people can mix and mingle. They can all sit down and have dinner. They can all watch fireworks in the middle of the summer. It's those spaces that carry on your history and your town tradition.
Would anybody consider a vision where it's kind of expanding the current image of the center of the town? So instead of another center, kind of expanding the way we look historically right now.
By what means, I guess? What would you expand next?
The village center. So small shops and quaint shops and whatever.
Ask us again next semester.
See how curved a line is, put a straight line right next to it. And I think a few weeks ago I had the fortunate opportunity to be in Madrid, Spain, in the medieval section, and you'll see a building. I'm thinking of a museum in particular from the 1800s, and right next to it is this great floating cantilevered ceiling of enameled red metal. And you can never see this building from the 1800s so clearly until you see it juxtaposed to this very modern thing. So, I mean, one approach, I think, if you really want to see Shelburne, the town center and the historic buildings here, it may be to make a counterpoint to it. But
there's more energy.
Yeah.
And part of the problem of this to develop in such piecemeal, no continuity whatsoever. So it's just a mishmash of unattractive, not well thought out design material type buildings all through it. I think it was that's why Al kept asking about materials and design. He's trying to think of how we can have more continuity going down through them, more attractive continuity. I'm sorry,
I think it was an attempt of continuing Shelburne, but without spending the money and the design that has been invested in the village. And just like these stage set, I mean, all of those buildings only have one facade. And I don't think that kind of continuity just does not work.
I would just like to say that when I was telling a lot of people about this project, or like what I'm currently working on, people that are familiar with Vermont say, okay, I'm working on a project in Shelburne. And they say, oh, the village. And I said, no, above that. And they said, oh, Burlington. I said, no, from between the village and South Burlington. And a lot of people just, oh, well, what's there? What's there? So I guess that's a lot of the mindset that we're all in, and how can we create that excitement And so I've noticed.